Open the door to a new career on your terms with this video's sponsor, boot.dev. Click the link below and use offer code SKILLUP30 at checkout to get 30% off your entire first year of the annual plan. That's an even bigger discount than usual, so do get in quick. More details after the video. Blood of the Dawnwalker is one of the most hyped games of 2026, or at least it was until IGN uploaded an 8-minute gameplay reveal. Now this wasn't IGN's fault, at least I don't think it was, since I'm sure they were provided this footage by Studio Rebel Wolves and they just uploaded it, but this really wasn't a great showcase of what this game is, or any game really. I mean, they spent like 4 minutes of this 8-minute video literally looking at a wall, and when it wasn't doing that, it was showing off some combat that looked a little stiff, some visuals that looked a little basic, and some facial animations that looked a little wooden. But that was 8 minutes of gameplay. Today, I come to you bearing 20-ish minutes of gameplay, none of which is mine by the way, it's all provided B-roll. But I did play the game for about 4 hours, completing the game's ambitious prologue. I'm here to tell you that the IGN preview you saw was largely accurate, except for the wall stuff I guess, that was a bit disproportionate. Combat is a little stiff, visuals certainly aren't cutting edge, and facial animations could definitely do with a pass or 2, or 3, depending on which character you're talking to. But honestly, I really don't give a shit about that because I was 100% locked in during my 4 hours with this, completely hooked by the dark world building, these ambitious, morally grey decisions I was forced to make, this intriguing spin on vampires as both dictators and saviors, and this novel approach to vampirism, where the hunger can force you to do things that you may not want to do, forever altering your path as you kill important NPCs or become infamous among the citizenry. And that was just the storytelling, where I also like the combat, simple though it is. I also like the visuals too, simple as they are. The facial animations, yeah, I agree, they aren't great, but I do hold in my mind an awareness that this is not a game from CD Projekt Red with their hundreds of staff and their billions of dollars. This is a debut title from an independent studio that started with just 20 people back in 2022 and is now sitting at around 150 people as they're about to ship their game. In that context, I am more than willing to look past some presentation issues, especially when the source is this good. That source may, at first glance, look, smell, and taste like The Witcher 3 Reheated. It's a little surprise, of course, almost all of the leadership of this studio had leadership roles while making The Witcher 3, including game director, quest director, senior writer, lead concept artist, composers, and more. Rather than shy away from that legacy, Rebel Wolves have embraced it with 2 clawed hands, delivering a visual palette, soundscape, combat rhythm, and storytelling vibe that is so Witcher, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this was some sort of licensed spin-off. I suspect there will be plenty of commentary based on these previews about whether or not this is too Witcher, and I think it's a fair question, but I promise you, there is a lot more to this game than the very Witcher-esque inspirations. Its world building is different and feels even darker and more bleak than The Witcher did. Its dual gameplay model is vastly different, spending time as both a human and a vampire depending on the time of day, and that choice is yours by the way, more on that later. Speaking of time of day, that's a huge thing here since the entire game runs on a 30-day clock where every major action you take moves time forward, and many of the quest outcomes will depend on how you choose to spend your limited time. Speaking of quests, did you know that you don't actually need to do any of them in order to complete the game? Once you step out of the prologue, you can beeline straight for the main objective and finish the game immediately, just like Breath of the Wild, or you can do absolutely everything and spend an estimated 70 hours plus to see it all. For me, Blood of the Dawnwalker is walking a fine balance of the familiar and the new. I won't lie, if I squinted while playing, I'd swear I was running around the foothills of Kaer Morhen again. But when my eyes were wide open, I could clearly see all the big and small ways that Blood of the Dawnwalker is looking to move beyond Geralt's long shadow. And all I could think when I put down the controller after 4 hours was, God damn man, I cannot wait to lose like 60 plus hours to this game.
No, we haven't got time.
Hurry up, Cohen. They're waiting.
Blood of the Dawnwalker's most alluring quality is its dark fantasy setting, embracing a grim, almost nihilistic tone that feels oppressively bleak in every moment. While the plague ravages 14th century Europe, this little pocket of the world is protected by way of a Faustian bargain. A vampire lord by the name of Brensis uses his blood to protect people from the plague, and protect them from outside aggressors who might otherwise pillage their lands. Health and security is a rare gift during such a dark time, but a great price must be paid for this protection. The people must regularly pay a blood tax to their lord in order to satiate his hunger, something that occurs once a month at a ceremonial blood mass. It's not enough to kill those he drinks from, unless of course those people were already weak enough not to survive the mass, in which case Brensis is perfectly willing to cull the weakness from his flock. It's on the eve of one of these masses that we meet our hero, Cohen, a predetermined character who cannot be customized in any way. He's a miner's son and worked in the silver mines from a young age, a detail that is not at all insignificant. He and his family do their best to keep their heads down, but their mother is suffering from a psychological ailment ailment that leaves her catatonic and unwilling to eat. In her weakened state, she's unlikely to survive the next mass, and Cohen's journey begins with a simple goal of trying to get her to eat so that she might have strength enough to see another full moon. As Cohen begins his quest, the contours of this bleak world begin to take shape. From the setup I've just provided, you might imagine that Brensis is maniacal and keeps a firm boot on the neck of the local populace, but it's more complicated and frankly more interesting than that. Brensis is ruthless, but he doesn't seem cruel. He's omnipotent, but he isn't a mad king. His grip is firm, but he seems more interested in efficiently ruling his fiefdom than he does torturing it for sport. In turn, many of the locals acknowledge and even appreciate this accord. While they fear Brensis, they fear disease and war even more, and so they see the price he extracts as a fair one, or at least the lesser of two evils. That's an interesting idea in a story such as this, where we might imagine that a ruling vampire who feeds on his subjects must be capital E evil, and the entire population eager to overthrow him. Instead, Brensis seems more pragmatic than anything else, and his rule is a form of benevolent dictatorship, one that many of his subjects are eager to protect for fear of the alternative. The world building has layers beyond that too. There are military forces aligned to Brensis, as well as those representing other regions, and they all jostle for control of Brensis' territory. There's a growing insurgency among the populace, hoping to strike when Brensis is weak so they can regain their freedom, though not everyone sees it that way. There's witchcraft here too, like the ability to heal or reanimate corpses so you can converse with them. There's so much more, and all of this is served up in just the opening hours of the game. Right off the jump, it feels incredibly dense and rich and interesting. Blood of the Dawnwalker may not have the graphics or facial animations of a modern AAA game, but it has something far more valuable, to me at least, a feeling of authorship. The sense that talented people imagined a world and wrote it to life. None of the presentation blew me away, but I vividly remember many of the NPCs that I met, the storylines I found myself in, and the world building I could sense around me at all times. That stuff is the true measure of an experience like this, I think, and so far Blood of the Dawnwalker is delivering in spades.
Says I. Give it back.
Should have minded your own beeswax, lad.
I weaved it knot by knot. And look how my neighbours repaid me.
Just as Dawnwalker is looking to deliver a fresh new world to explore, it's also looking to deliver a fresh new spin on the open world RPG formula. But where the narrative and world building immediately look to differentiate themselves, Dawnwalker's structural differences take more time to make themselves felt, pun intended. The starting point is familiarity, especially if you've played The Witcher 3. The game kind of looks like The Witcher in terms of its setting, color palette, architecture, and NPC attire. Open up the menu and you're going to find an inventory that looks perhaps a little too familiar, and a map with perhaps too many icons on it. The music is, yeah, it's very Witcher, to the point where I'm like, maybe we could have stretched a little more here. Add to that a choice-based dialogue system powering branching narratives and a melee and spell-based combat model that we'll talk a little bit more about later, and the opening act of Dawnwalker serves up more than enough ammunition for anyone willing to argue that we have The Witcher at home. It's not until you start getting into the prologue proper that things start to feel a little different. The quest to save your mother is the only objective you have when you're sent out your door at the start of the day, but consistent with the rest of the game's design philosophy, you can completely ignore that quest if you want to. However, there will be consequences for doing so. This is where we need to start talking about the way that Dawnwalker handles time. In this prologue, you have a full day to complete your task, and this little bar in the top right denotes how much time you've spent. Important to note that time does not flow freely. There's no timer constantly running that forces you to move quickly. Instead, time only moves forward when you make decisions and commit to courses of action. For example, you might pick up a quest from a villager asking for help, and their request won't move the clock forward. You can then go wandering around the countryside for like 5 hours, doesn't matter, as long as you like, right? But the moment you go to the place they've asked you to go and you speak to the relevant NPC and you select the relevant dialogue option, you are now committing to the act of moving that quest forward, at which point the clock moves forward.
Make it quick then.
Nice pig you have here. It's a Yorgoose though, isn't it? I recognize that patch.
I felt this system very keenly as I was working my way through the prologue because there were more quests than I could have completed in a single day. I had to choose which ones I would complete versus which ones I would skip, and that simple decision had numerous trade-offs associated with it. For example, you can choose to ignore that quest to save your mother entirely, spending your time helping others instead. Time will march on, and when the day is done and it's finally time for mass, your mother's fate is sealed. Similarly, you can beeline your mother's questline to the exclusion of all else, since there's a time jump option once that quest is completed, allowing you to skip straight to the mass. At that point, you'll see the consequences of having ignored everyone else in the village, since some of them also needed your help to survive the mass, something you wouldn't have known had you not spent time exploring the village and speaking to its citizens. The standout example of this begins this way.
Kremler? What happened?
Someone took the banner. The one Kinyaz Brensis ordered for the church to replace the old cross. And masses tonight, when Kinyaz Brensis demanded the village made a new banner for the church. No one was willing to, so I took it upon myself to protect the village. Save you all from the Kinyaz's wrath. If you work out who did it, you come right back to me, lad. Or else, I'm good as dead.
So that's the setup. An old lady was making a banner at the behest of Brensis, and she volunteered to do it because she wanted to spare other villagers the wrath of Brensis were they to get it wrong. Now someone has stolen the banner and the old lady is sure to be punished unless it can be found before the mass begins. At this point, you'll use your Witcher senses, and yes, they really do have Witcher senses here, to track down the thief, learning that they were wounded and they used a cane to walk. When you confront him, he freely admits to his crime because the banner was a form of heresy, depicting vampires as deities in place of their traditional god. He says his act of defiance is one that he knew he would pay the ultimate price for, but he says that his death is worth it if it inspires others towards rebellion. At that point, you have to choose what to do. Do you keep this man's secret and let the old woman die, or do you reveal it and damn him instead? Does he deserve to die because of his thieving, or is he justified because of his higher purpose? And that old woman who does Brensis' bidding, should she be punished for her heresy, or does it matter that she only volunteered to protect others from a fate that she was about to meet? It very much reminded me of one of the first quests in The Witcher 3, where an arson burns down a dwarf's house because the dwarf is making arms for the occupying army. Even though the dwarf doesn't really want to be doing that, if Geralt turns in the man out of a sense of moral righteousness, the man is summarily executed, a punishment that seems to far outweigh the crime. The moral tensions within these two quests are similar, but the structure of them is different because of your limited time and because of how the outcomes of these quests are resolved. In The Witcher, that quest will only resolve itself if you intervene. The events of that quest essentially don't exist until you set them in motion, but in Dawnwalker's clockwork universe, events will move forward with or without your intervention. If you never discover this woman and you never begin her questline, she will still die, and you'll see her strung up on the church as you enter the mass, a reminder that in Dawnwalker, your inaction defines events as much as your action does. Much the same could be said of the game's broader quest structure, because what I've described to you is only the prologue. After the larger set of events are set in motion, you have 30 days and 30 nights to rescue your family from Brensis before a coronation ceremony. What's interesting about this is that you can walk right up to the castle immediately after the prologue and confront Brensis. Much like Ganon in Breath of the Wild, Brensis is always ready to greet you, though the path through his castle and your final battle with him will no doubt be significantly more challenging if you haven't already weakened his hold on the region, dispatched his lieutenants, and secured yourself weapons, armor, and experience to steel yourself. We've obviously seen this approach in the modern Zelda games, but to adopt it in a narrative-led open-world RPG is very ambitious. On the one hand, it's exciting because it makes the game a sandbox that allows you to pick and choose where to go and what you want to do. On the other hand, it brings with it considerable risk when it comes to the narrative. See this menu here with Brensis and his lieutenants? The moment I saw this, I got flashbacks to like every Ubisoft game for the past 10 years. The freedom to complete objectives in any order sounds good on paper, but it's much harder to construct compelling narratives and character arcs when you need to keep everything deliberately fragmented so that it can be reconstituted in any order. Honestly, this is kind of my biggest concern about the game at this point. It's not impossible to tell a good story this way, but it is much harder, and I'm going to be very interested to see how Rebel Wolves tackle this challenge, because given how leveraged this experience is into its world building, storytelling, and characters, a misstep here could see this entire experience collapse into a heap. So Dawnwalker is delivering a new setting, some compelling world building, and a novel structure that forces you to confront the consequences of both your actions and your inactions. But it isn't stopping there. It's also delivering a satisfying combat model that looks to respond to criticisms leveled at The Witcher 3's combat, while also offering a really unique spin on vampirism that affects not only your combat, but also your exploration, dialogue options, and reputation with the citizenry. Combat first though. Yes, you are again a dude with a sword fighting other dudes with swords, with combat framing that feels very reminiscent of Geralt. And again, that is no accident, since the person who did the motion capture for Cohen is a guy named Maciej Kwiatkowski, and he was the same dude who did motion capture for Geralt in The Witcher 3 Rebel Wolves. You absolutely cannot keep getting away with this. Anyway, the big difference here is the focus on directional inputs. Cohen will automatically block attacks in any direction, but doing so will cost stamina. If, however, you can block in the right direction and time it properly, that block won't cost you any stamina, freeing you up to go on the offensive and also earning you extra activation charge that can be used for various abilities, like throwing sand in your enemy's face, for example. So look, this is pretty simple stuff, but I will tell you, it is solid. Much like Kingdom Come Deliverance, it's incredibly satisfying when you're able to read your enemy and actively block their attacks, and the overall flow and feeling of combat feels great too. It is a little stiff to the eye since it isn't putting a premium on flashy animations. It's functional to look at, but it's honestly much more fun to play than it looks.
Easy, fucking peasy.
Things get a hell of a lot more fun when you're fighting as a vampire, though I guess we should explain how all of that works first. During the prologue, Cohen becomes what he fears most, a vampire. This is a process initiated by Brensis, who takes one of his teeth and rams it into Cohen's heart, though that transformation wasn't as complete as Brensis would have hoped for. Because Cohen grew up in the silver mines, his body rejected at least part of the transformation, and that's how he's able to move about in the day without melting into sticky goo. Hence, Dawnwalker. The only downside to that is that Cohen is not as powerful as the other vampires who have fully embraced their dark gift. Still, Cohen has at least some of the perks of being a vampire. A shadowy teleportation ability is useful in both exploration, but also in combat. Cohen can also walk on walls, and during combat he can feast on his enemies to regain health. But that blood hunger has its own fascinating trade-offs outside of combat. If you aren't topped up and you enter a dialogue sequence, some of the dialogue will randomly change for just a split second to an option that will see you sink your fangs into their neck. You could choose to wait for this text to change by timing it, or you can select it accidentally when the words just happen to transform at the moment you press that button. That's obviously meant to simulate Cohen losing control, and the thing is, this can happen at very inconvenient moments. When you're talking to NPCs you might want to keep alive. Rebel Wolves have confirmed that you can, in fact, kill important quest NPCs, which may forever close off certain quest lines to you. And while I'm sure that can be circumvented with a bit of save scumming, it's cool to imagine a playthrough where you just submit to the outcome of your dark urges. What makes this even more interesting is that playing as a vampire is always a choice. Rebel Wolves have also confirmed that you can skip every night cycle, choosing to slumber while you wait for the break of day. That way you can play through the entire game as a human, and of course you can also do the exact opposite, skipping daytime sequences so you live only as a vampire. Committing to these singular playthroughs is challenging though, since you're essentially giving yourself 50% less time on the clock to complete quests, vanquish foes, collect gear, and gain experience, and you'll also lose some of the crossover benefits that might come from one style of play, like hexes for example, which are specific to your human form. But this choice doesn't need to be so binary either, since the game will regularly let you choose how you want to accomplish objectives as either a vampire or a human, with completely different paths available to you depending on which form you take. The infiltration of a stronghold might be challenging for Cohen in his human form, but it's doable so long as he's willing to fight or sneak his way through. For Vampire Cohen though, you can literally just run straight up walls and teleport across distances. There's a little bit of immersive sim baked into this formula, and given the power and flexibility of the vampire fantasy, I think this approach is just what the doctor ordered.
So many bugs.
This is nothing.
So look, usual caveats apply here. This is a preview build, it's still in development. The prologue was great, but the full game might suck, you never know. But I do genuinely think that this prologue was great. And to those of you who were rattled by that IGN clip, I do hope I've given you at least a little bit of comfort. I do want to come back to those Witcher 3 comparisons though, because even in this preview, I've spoken about the many ways that this game feels like a spiritual successor to The Witcher. It kind of looks like The Witcher, it's in a similar setting and time period, the soundtrack sounds extremely Witcher, the combat feels very Witcher inspired. I mean, they use the same dude for motion capture, for Christ's sake. There's even Witcher sensors. I mean, really, Rebel Wolves, did you need to bring back the Witcher sensors? So yes, that is all true, inescapably so. But I do hope that throughout this preview, I've showed you the many ways that this isn't just The Witcher, and those ways are far from tokenistic. This is obviously an all-new world built on new moral and political complexity, challenging our expectations of what an evil vampire lord might be like, or how citizens might respond to their rule. There's the time mechanic, which forces you to choose some things and forego others, and unlike similar games, the things you forego can be just as important as the things you commit to. There's the freedom to beeline toward the final confrontation immediately, or spend the 50, 60, 70 hours fully exploring the lands to ready yourself for that climactic showdown. There's a non-linear approach to storytelling that allows you to write your own saga in whatever page order you please, and there's effectively two different gameplay fantasies you can interface with, human and vampire, each with their own approach to combat and exploration, and you have the choice to engage with both of them or just one if that's your preference. Everything I listed there is pretty core stuff. So yeah, the inventory looks like the inventory from The Witcher 3, but the similarities between these two games is rather skin deep. Scratch away at them for just a little and I think you're going to find a very different game underneath. One that I really love playing through for 4 hours, and one that I am very, very excited to play for dozens more when the game releases on September 3rd this year for PC, PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. I will have a full review up at or near the embargo, so do look forward to that. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one, by the way. Thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, boot.dev. This video is brought to you by boot.dev, the best online learning platform for people who want to learn back-end web development by actually doing it. I don't know if you know this, but something is happening in the world of software and web development where a while ago people were declaring the end of software engineers and web developers, saying that AI agents will replace every single job. Now the number of software development and web development job adverts has been increasing year on year. That's because these companies are figuring out that vibe coding isn't a substitute for real knowledge and experience. Maybe an AI agent can get you to the point where some code is written. To get it fully tested and deployed requires actual human expertise, and that's a trend that isn't changing anytime soon. That's the philosophy underpinning everything at boot.dev. It's a platform that teaches you the hard skills that you need to start a new career, one that pays very well and that often lets you work from home, and that lets you choose where you work since there are so many companies that need skilled web developers. The training is tailored to the type of work you'd be doing out on the job, like learning and programming from start to finish in Python, or setting up and using Linux the way seasoned programmers do. If you ever feel lost, you have a personal tutor that can help you get back on track by asking you questions instead of just giving you the answers. The training grounds are another resource to help you if you feel stuck. They're an arena of sorts to grind out course-related challenges for as long as you need to help you feel as confident as possible in your learning before moving on to the next course. The training grounds add to boot.dev's gamified approach to learning that gives you challenges, awards XP, and even has leaderboards so you can track your progress and compete with other students. How many students, you ask? Over 820,000, and you can read reviews from many of them on the boot.dev website. But you don't need to take their word for it either, since all the learning content on boot.dev is free to view, so you can sign up right now and check it out, no strings attached. And in fact, each of the modules has a free demo for the paid interactive learning element, so you can try before you buy. True learning is all about doing, and so signing up for a subscription gives you access to all of the interactive tools and exercises. Just click the link below and use offer code SKILLUP30 at checkout to get 30% off your entire first year on the annual plan. That's a huge discount and only available for a limited time. Plus, there's also a 30-day money-back satisfaction guarantee, so if you aren't happy for any reason at all, you can get your money back. Click below in either the description or the pinned comment and use offer code SKILLUP30 for that 30% off your entire first year of the annual plan. Thanks boot.dev for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.